This episode is brought to you by Trident Coffee, the veteran-owned brand where every sip inspires you to live life full steam ahead. At Trident, they are more than just coffee. They are storytellers. It's crafted by veterans. Their instant cold brew is perfect for those who serve, those who have served, and anyone who values wellness. Featuring natural ingredients like organic mushrooms, adaptogens, and nootropics, it's more than just a morning pick-me-up. It's your new wellness ritual. Enjoy it at home or on the go, wherever your day takes you. Trident Coffee isn't just about great tasting coffee. It's about empowering you to be the healthiest version of yourself because great veterans make great citizens. Try their instant cold brew coffee today and taste the freedom of wellness. Remember, when you choose Trident, you're not just choosing coffee. You're choosing a path of connection through health and wellness. Use promo code DTD15 for 15% off your order.
Two guys and two black cats. Let's go.
In 3, 2, 1, and we're live. What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the DTD podcast, Dynamic Tales Delivered. This week in the studio, I am super happy that this guy came in to talk to me. He's been a Navy SEAL, he's been a U.S. Marine, he's been a Blackwater contractor, he's been all over the world. He's even worked for John McAfee at one point. He has an amazing story that I can't wait for you guys to hear. He's really risen up out of the ashes and changed his life. And oh, by the way, he's best friends with another guy that's been on the show. I think you're in for a treat this week. So without further ado, let's welcome into the studio, Jimmy Watson. What's up, my friend?
Man, I'm good here in Miami, just working hard like everybody else, you know?
Yeah, man, I'm so happy that you're on here. Now, I want to start off this interview. I started off with T-Cav, who you know, by asking him if he was ever in the CIA. But I have another question for you. I would like to know about what happened in Vancouver.
I have no idea.
Well, T-Cav told me to ask you about Vancouver specifically.
Man, did he bust me out? Was that... Oh, my gosh, man. You see my face? Did you see my face? So I was like, I have no idea what you're talking about, brother. So, you know, man, the FBI asked me about that as well. And all I can say is that after the SEALs, me and him were asked by a very, very wealthy businessman to go and sometimes these billionaires want their payment, their money for whatever. And I wasn't really privy to the details, but all we were tasked to do was go and politely ask the gentleman to give the money back. And things went okay. And I guess it was a mission success. I don't know, you know?
All right.
It was a long time ago.
All right.
That's freaking hilarious, though. T-Cav busted me out. First question. That's a great icebreaker, though. I love it, man.
Yeah. So, you know, your whole life, your whole story is all based in these stuff, you know, and you would even say like myth, legend. There's all different kinds of way that you can describe it. I want to go back, though, all the way back like we always do and start with your youth. West Texas, you're growing up on a ranch, the Mill Shoe Ranch. You're running around, digging holes, playing military. Let's talk about your family and the beginnings of kind of your ideas of what you wanted to do in the future, because as far as I understand, from day one, you wanted to be in the military.
From day one, I wanted to be a SEAL. Like, I'll just put it like this. I read all these books, like, and I was like considered almost dang near dyslexic, super ADD. It wasn't ADHD at the time. It was ADD. But I read all these books and I watched the History Channel. So I just soaked up all this information on like recondo, LURPS, you know, long range reconnaissance patrols, sniper, Dear Mom, all these different books, man, about recon, all this stuff. And I was just obsessed with SEAL books, recon, the jungle, SEAL stuff. And I honestly don't know where I got that unction other than my earliest childhood memory. Call me crazy or not. I've only met one other guy that kind of collaborated this, but you know, I can remember almost being in a big white lit room, and it was like God's voice. And He wasn't telling me to go be a SEAL, but I heard this voice, my earliest memory, and it said, "Are you sure?" And I said, "Yes." And then the next sentence was, "Are you sure it's going to be hard?" And then it's like, boom, I show up on earth. As crazy as that sounds. But I always knew my destiny was to be in the SEAL teams. And I don't know, I almost even wanted to die for my country, as crazy as that sounds.
Well, was there anything? Because I talked to a lot of guys, and the movies really got them going. Predator at the time, Navy SEALs, the movie, and it sounds even deeper with you that really that you went for this. Now, was there any family members, any history of the military in your family?
No, actually, I had like this distant, long lost cousin who was a Navy SEAL. And finally, my mom, God bless her soul, love her, she organized this meeting with him on a cell phone or on the phone. And he was very difficult to get a hold of. And I remember she finally got me in connection with him. And he was such an asshole. I couldn't even believe it because I got on the phone with him and it was like a 2 minute call. And he literally said, "You're probably never going to make it, brother." And that was it. And I was like, "No, but I really want to do this." It's like I was telling him, like, "You don't know who you're talking to, bro. Like, I don't think you know who you're talking to." And by any means, I didn't have what it took physically. I didn't have what it took mentally. I was almost dyslexic unless I wanted to learn it. And so I had a long journey to go, brother.
So, as you moved through high school and stuff, I know that you left school early. Was there a specific reason that you did that? Because here's kind of the outline that I get of your whole family and you. Through everything, and even up to your arrest and all of those kind of things, your family was still there. Because I know at times when your father came and talked to you when they were putting the house arrest monitors on you and everything. So your family's been around there the whole time. What was going on specifically that would make you leave? Because when you usually look at stuff like that, there's a lot of trouble at home. People are trying to get away. They are trying to be an adult at the time. What was it in your situation that made that happen?
Yeah, I can't say that my parents were bad. They were like these super loving parents. Like my first memory, really, when I was a young kid for the crazy divine thing, was that my mom and dad scooping me up at like 3 in the morning in these soft blankets and putting me in this old suburban with my brother and my sister, my little brother, and then we would just wake up in Albuquerque from West Texas because we were heading to Disneyland in California. And it was so fun. And my parents weren't rich. It was like kind of the opposite. They just saved and saved and saved on this old West Texas farm. So I had this beautiful childhood. But man, when you put me in a school environment, and it was like the opposite of who I was and what I wanted to do. I knew I wanted to be a something, that SEAL, the Marine, whatever it was. And it was like everybody was trying to hold Jimmy Watson down. And I had that lion's heart, but I had this weak outer shell. I was like six 6'1" in high school, or 6 foot in high school, and about 140 pounds, like just soaking wet, and that's not a good thing with bullies and everything else. And so it's not like I was known as like kind of a fierce guy. Like my punches may be soft in the school, but I was gonna punch you. And so I got in trouble for that. I got in trouble for outbursts. I would get in trouble for like stupid stuff, like calling my teacher by his first name. His name was Chester. And so, the first day Chester came in, or Mr. Puller, whatever, he came in, the math teacher, and I remember I hated tyranny. I hated like corruption. I just hated it from the time I was small, any kind of weird stuff like that. And I could detect it easily. And I remember sitting in there in class, my parents had moved me from one school to the next. And I'm sitting there, and they said, Jimmy, just behave. Whatever you do, this is your last shot in school. And I'm like 13 years old. I sit down with my pencil, my books. I remember spitball hits me in the back of the head. I don't do anything. I control myself. And the teacher comes in just pissed and says, I was going to give this class a shot. I was going to be easy on you. I was going to be nice to you. I was going to be easy on the grades and all this stuff. But someone called me by my first name when I was walking into the class, and now I'm going to make it hell for each and every one of you in here. And about that time, the spitball hit me again. And so I raised my hand, and he said, nobody ever better call me by my first name again. And I raised my hand, and he wouldn't answer me. And so I eventually said, hey, Chester, real loud, yelled his name. It was super bad. I got yanked to the office. So that was kind of my first day at the new school, and it just went downhill.
Well, it seems, throughout your career, and it's funny that you bring up your parents and say that they're not rich, that they just saved and stuff, but your dad did a ton of different things. He was a crop duster, a judge, a landowner. There was all kinds of stuff that he did. Was his ideals and his work ethic, did that come through on you? And do you see that as you move through your career? Because he seems, in everything that I've heard, everything that I've read, that he was a extremely hard worker with very good values.
Oh yeah, extremely hard shoes to fill. In his grandpa, my dad couldn't imagine filling his shoes, right? And I can't even imagine filling my grandpa's shoes. I mean, these guys were hardcore West Texas dry land workers. Like you said, my dad was a Texas judge, petroleum technology degree, theology degree, crop duster. Now he's doing contracts, firebombing, doing all that kind of stuff. A landowner, 2,000 acres. But, he wasn't, we weren't never well off, but he was ambitious. And he always instilled in me, Watson's, don't quit. And even at Bud's graduation, SEAL graduation, I walked up to him and I said, is this good enough? Like, look at this, the trident. And he said, almost there, son, almost there. But he was kind of joking in a sense, but in another way, he was saying, yeah, that's cool, but what else you got in you? He always knew I could be a SEAL. It was weird. He knew things. One of the things that he instilled in us is no matter what happens in life, you cannot quit as a man. I'm talking no matter what. And I would have to prove that later on in my life. And it was extremely difficult because talk is extremely cheap.
So let me ask you then, with all of these ideals, with how his work ethic is, with how your mother loved you, surrounded you and your brother and sister, what are their emotions? What are their feelings when you drop out of school?
Well, they basically took me out of school. I was doing super bad. I was making it a sick game. They gave me detention hall, so I would ask for more. I had the record of detention hall at the school, 99 days. I tried to get them to give me another day, and they actually released me from detention not to give me the other day because they saw how I was kind of embracing it. Peanut butter and jelly sandwiches every day in detention, SWATs all the time. That's when they used to just beat your ass with a board. And it was disheartening for them because the other kids were picking it up. My little brother and my sister were doing fine. But I just was on a different road. I was on a mission to go do the SEALs or the Marines or something like that. And I thought everything else was a complete waste of time. If it interested me, I would do it. But eventually, my parents were really just left with one option. Jimmy just drops out of school. We're tired of him getting punished. We're tired of seeing him beat, getting swats all the time. Or we just take him out of school. So they just came up to me and they said, Jimmy, we're going to go ahead and take you out of school. And I said, great, it's about time. And I remember them telling the principal that, and the principal was super down. The same guy that punished me all the time was now extremely down because he understood that basically he had kind of failed in his duty, but really it was me, making these decisions and wanting to do something else.
So when you look back on that, when you look back at that principal, when you look back at your parents, do you feel like, I don't want to say did you cheat them, but do you feel like you let them down in a certain way, even though they may have never said it to you?
I feel like I exceeded way beyond their expectations, because if you follow my story and you see what really happened to me in the SEALs, and me actually having to hang myself and do some pretty outrageous things to win my case, it was heartbreaking for them to see me try so hard. Because one thing that they saw in me, and that the instructors and stuff look at SEALs, is that I didn't want to quit ever. I gave my freaking all. And that may not be saying much if I'm still making F's and getting the record detention all, but I still showed up and I was giving my absolute all. And they knew that. And so they always supported me, because they were like, dude, this guy's giving everything he's got, you know?
Was there anything, was there, extracurricular stuff? Did you play sports? Did you do anything like that where you actually had, because from everything that you're saying, it sounds like you really, there wasn't much that you liked growing up other than, like you said, digging holes, playing military, thinking about that, reading the books that you wanted to read. Was there other things that you were interested in as a kid?
I love shooting guns. I love shooting my BB gun. I started out with the slingshot, the fundamentals. I graduated to a BB gun, then a 20 gauge shotgun, then a 12 gauge shotgun, then a rifle. And I went through all this stuff, hunting all the time outside. I hated sports. I literally saw no reason. I thought sports was the stupidest thing that I've ever seen in my life. Football was so dumb that I couldn't even comprehend why dudes were bending over and handing this ball between their legs, wearing tights and running around each other. This is my thinking, you know?
Well, that's
And
a horrible thing in West Texas to believe. I mean, it's huge in Texas. So
it's
you're
huge.
definitely on the outside.
Big time on the outside. And so when we moved to Laz Buddy, I did 6-man football for a while. The coaches, would not play me. And my parents came down one day. I was put on like the C string, and they weren't even playing me, bench me. And I remember my parents came down and asked the coach, they said, please play Jimmy just one time. And the coach was told my mom that, he said, if I played Jimmy one time, I would probably get fired from the school, right? And so that's the kind of athleticism I had, because I didn't want to do it, you know? I just wanted to play and run outside and explore, dig holes outside, make big tree houses. And I just can remember being in just awe at the outdoors in the environment. My parents literally, I begged my parents for so long that eventually they just allowed me to go and camp miles away. I mean, that 2,000 acres is pretty large, and you could, as far as you could see down these telephone poles about 2 miles away, I think it was. I would go all the way down these sand dunes and disappear as a little, like maybe what was like 8 years old, 9 years old, on my own, camping by myself with a fire, marshmallows, tent. I just wanted to be alone and do that stuff.
You think that paid off later on in life?
I think it paid off. Yeah. Yeah. I stayed true to my dream. I stay true to it. You have to stay true to your dream, no matter what anybody says. Your truth may not be other people's truth. My truth may not be other people's truth, but I stayed true to myself, right? I went for the dream. I had it in my mind. I was chicken sometimes. I strayed away from it at other times. I backed away from it, but I still kept going for that dream, that destiny that I thought I had.
Well, and a second part to that question would be, did it work out for you being alone and stuff? So I guess the second part of that would be being alone. You were in such a team environment for so much of your life, and that's Marine Corps, Blackwater, and the SEALs. You're in such a team environment, but you're a very individualistic person. You set the goals for yourself, not necessarily for the team. But in those arenas, don't you kind of live and die by that team mentality?
Yeah, exactly. I thrived as a young man alone. I've always done very well alone. But then there's a very dark side to being alone. There's the isolation. There's the fake lone wolf that some of us would like to believe that we're really not, after a couple shots at the bar, And so I definitely developed I was this wild kid, isolated, alone, and I had to really be forced into that Marine Corps disciplined team unit as one. But it was very hard for me. They had to really yank the slack out of me, so to speak, to form into a team mindset. But I loved it. I loved being kind of yelled at as a kid. I loved the harsh treatment because I kind of understood it was fake, but I knew it was necessary to form that cohesive team.
When you do it, when you join the military, I'm guessing, I'm thinking 99, correct? That's when you go in the Marine
Right.
Corps, is 99. So 99, we're before 9/11. You're in a peacetime kind of Marine Corps. You go in and you start this, this crazy career that you had, and we'll get into the depths of it. With your brother and sister, we've talked a lot about your parents. What did they feel like when you left? Because little brother and sister, you're leaving for the Marine Corps. They had kind of a different path set in front of them too. What was it that they thought about big brother leaving?
Well, I have a major regret in my life of this because I was so wild, because I left school early, because I went to the Marine Corps at 16, 17 years old, signed in by my parents. My little brother followed suit. But the problem is that wasn't my little brother's destiny. So he was following a very wrong example. So my little brother literally went to New Mexico Military Institute, got in a fight, hit a kid over the face with an iron while he was ironing his uniform, got in a big lawsuit, got kicked out, and then dropped out of school after that and went down a really hard road because he was just like, well, Jimmy didn't do it. And he kind of idolized me, because I was like this kind of young warrior. And, when your little brother, he just looks up to you, especially how independent I was. And so he kind of followed my footsteps, but it never was working out for him. And so that's hard. That's a hard memory. And now that we talk about it, it's coming out. But everybody was always super supportive, but it was kind of like the Jimmy Watson show. It wasn't about my little brother or sister, and but my parents really nurtured that as well because I was very ambitious.
I'm guessing at no point then you kind of pulled him inside and said, look, this is my path. This isn't yours. There was never anything like that between you two.
Oh, there was many of those conversations along the way. Not when we were young, but as we got older, you know, I definitely had a lot of drinks with him, trying to be the good example while you're drinking a bunch of vodka, pop vodka in 15 Keystones each, but we love to hang out together. We love to party together. We had some crazy times together, but I was always trying to be the wrong example. I was always trying to be the right example, but I was really living the wrong example for him to look at. And so I would say it was a quite terrible example to live by and to follow because it was too much for him to keep up with. It was too hard for him to follow these footsteps, you know?
Well, so let me ask you then, and we'll get into it a little later about your men's group that you have, your men's tribe that you have, that you coach and you mentor these guys.
Yeah.
Do you take those lessons you learn from being the wrong example for your brother and things and use it to better these other guys that you're coaching now? I mean, do you constantly think back to that and go, I didn't do it right there. This is where I'm going to do it right now?
I think there's an element of that in all my teachings, all my mentorship. I'm the first one to admit and come in vulnerable and like straight up vulnerable. I try to take that mask off. It may take me a little bit to warm up, but I take that mask off and then I show the men and show the social media, my audience or whatever that is, whoever I'm talking to, the real me. And it can get dark. It can get bad. It can be very vulnerable to say that you're weak in this area or you're weak or you have these regrets. I have a lot of regrets. I live behind a mask the majority of my adult life. And after you've lived behind the mask for so long, you can actually tell when other men who others idolize are actually living behind a mask. And part of it's survival, right? But I try to take that mask off. I try to get the guys to take the mask off and show the real them, who they really are.
When you live behind a mask for so long, and you said that you did live behind a mask, is that right or is that wrong? Or is it maybe a gray area in between? Because I think that if you live behind the mask long enough, you can make it okay to yourself that it's okay to live behind it.
Yeah, you start to live in a world, a make believe world where you have to live in this world now because it's what's made you survive. It's what's got you through hell, you know? And it's not like you're being fake on purpose. It's literally you don't know who you are anymore. Like you become completely lost in yourself, and the more somebody disagrees with me on this issue, the more it's my opinion, not being a psychotherapist, of course, but more in my opinion, I see them needing the most help of them all.
Okay, so when do you figure out, and you know, depending on where it's at in your career, when do you figure out who you are? Because I think that there's always been this bravado, this macho guy, other than very young, because we've talked about when you were a kid and said that, you know, you were skinny, you're not ready. But I think at some point the macho guy, the warrior kind of came out of you. Was that who you really were, or was that something that you were doing trying to find out who you were?
I was trying to find out who I was. You know, I remember a dog ran after me one day and I jumped in my mom's arms when I was really small. But here comes my brother with a stick like a real warrior. And he's my younger brother, you know. So I was like, I was trying to be the big, tough, bigger brother. But Dan would throw hands. My little brother would throw hands before I would any day. But this developed with experience. It developed over time. You know, it developed in Baghdad. One of my first firefights in Baghdad, Iraq, you know, we just the insurgents shot literally down upon us like a fish barrel in an alley. And it seemed like we were dead men, and it was so just wrecking loud of echoes. And I remember, you know, the very first reaction that I had was I literally just left my gun on a seat and just jumped on the ground and like this. And after some bullets hit around, I saw this other SEAL. He grabbed his saw with a nutsack and started just waylaying across the street. And so I had to see certain things, you know, and that was in Blackwater, my first mission with Blackwater. But I had to see certain actions of other men. I do not believe that we are born with it. Unless you're Alexander the Great or somebody at 20 years old conquering Asia, I don't believe that we are born with this type of heroic warrior mentality.
So you think that a hero is not born, a hero is made.
I believe heroes are made. They have to see another man that they admire do something powerful in order to mimic this, in order to say, that's who I want to be. That's what we do with the movies. That's what we do with, look at the kids that are bodybuilders now because they idolize Arnold Schwarzenegger or something because they wanted the muscles, okay? And so they're willing to do incredible things, including juice and all kinds of stuff, whatever it takes to become that man. And I can remember at certain times in my life, after reading those books, after seeing the movie Platoon, after seeing Rambo, I wanted to be that guy. I didn't want to be the quarterback, the star quarterback. I could care less about that. I wanted to be that jungle warrior, green-faced guy with an M60 patrolling through the jungle, that kind of thing.
Right. So let's talk about that, though. There's got to be an internal struggle there because when you talk about your youth, when you talk about when you're first joining the military, you say you're not ready for all that stuff. You're not strong enough. You're not smart enough, however you want to put it. There's got to be an internal struggle tearing you apart on the inside when you're doing it.
Yeah, I don't know about that because, I didn't have what it took physically, but I had the lion's heart. I did have a big heart, and I don't know where I got that from. I don't know where I got that from. Some of it was learning But in other aspects, I think you're right that in other aspects, it was just there to fight through. From the time I was little till through the SEALs, through Blackwater, through the Marines, in every situation, I had to light a fire. I had a fire inside of me to make it, no matter what, no matter how many doors closed on me.
And so now that we're talking about your military career and we're kind of getting into it, I want to ask you a couple of words and what your definition of them are, okay? Let's start
Okay.
with freedom.
Freedom is the opposite of slave. But to make the best slave, you have to convince him that he's free, you know? And I think that a lot of people in America are slaves right now. I think that we have to abide by many rules that enslaves us, and it's becoming more and more with taxation and everything else. However, freedom is doing as much as you want to do that doesn't cause you to hurt others or put people in pain or steal or any of those moral codes.
Okay. So when you think about freedom and you put that definition forward and everything that you did with the Marines, with the SEALs, during the GWAT, all of those kind of things, does it bother you that freedom, you see it disappearing?
Yeah, it's absolutely terrible. I saw this happening 15 years ago. I saw it happening when the Nisar Square happened with me, you know, and with those guys. I saw it even a little bit before that with the investigations and stuff. Man, it's, you know, Rome is burning. We're sending all of our money over to Ukraine and Israel's in the name of protecting their borders, but we're not protecting our own borders. And it's so obvious to me, having been at the USS Cole bombing, and then 9/11 happens directly after the USS Cole bombing because we don't do anything about it. It's the same thing. Open border policy. You allow the enemy to come in. You allow the enemy to stay in Pearl Harbor, map out the harbor. And then Sunday, the big attack comes when everyone's sleeping. And every single, and most, I believe, especially the left and stuff, are just absolutely sleeping. It's terrifying considering the last 20 years, what's happened with our nation.
All right. So another word that I kind of feel ties through your entire story, military and even after, is religion. You quote your favorite Bible stories. When people would look at you, I think you can agree with me, when they're looking from the outside, they don't know you, they haven't done the research on you, anything like that. They would go, no way that guy's into religion. No way. That's a catchphrase. You would agree with that, right?
I would absolutely agree with that. Yeah.
So tell me then why it's so important to you.
Because it's real. It's the only thing that's real to me anymore. Is actual real stories of savages, of warriors, Jehu, even Jesus. I mean, just pure savages, but have been portrayed as weak, anemic, carrot sticks, veggie tails, you know, transparent skin. No, man, these dudes in the Bible were warriors. And I can remember my dad telling me these stories as a kid. And I just loved to hear them. I love to hear about how Joseph was thrown in the dungeon for 13 years for a crime he didn't do, and then rises out of the palace to become second in charge of Egypt. I love these stories. You know, it wasn't like I was buying in to the story, but I love the story. And I thought, man, that's powerful. That's what I want to do one day, you know? And so there is, I think we need to get away from religion. I think we need to get away from thinking that men have to be weak. You got to go to church. There ain't nothing that says you got to go to church. I didn't meet Jesus. Jesus literally met me at the darkest time of my life, at the bottom of the barrel, facing 15 years in prison. Okay. And I had done everything under the sun, pretty much, a very, very, very dark past, hanging out with one percenters, doing a bunch of really, really bad stuff. Crazy life. On the run from the law. And I was too weak, too broken down, too exhausted to meet any God, to even think about Jesus showing up. And so for me, I couldn't even go to church because I was on house arrest with an ankle bracelet. But Jesus found me. He goes to the lost. You can call him Yeshua HaMashiach, Jesus, whatever the case. That guy who died on the cross for us. And man, I'll tell you, after feeling his love and his power in my life, I was radically changed, man. And so, yeah, there's an element of that in there.
In saying all that, let me give you two more words. The first one I'm going to give you is hopeless. What's your definition of hopeless?
Hopeless is me without God. I don't even want to direct it to somebody to make them think I'm judging them. I don't judge any man. But hopeless was me on my road to hell. Proverbially speaking, physically, but more or less on this, you can be in hell in this life we live in. It's so dark out there. I've been to some dark places in this life, and opened up a lot of dark doors in my life, and bore the brunt of it, bore the ramifications of it, and that's hopeless. A lost ship in the night. Think about a lost ship in the night out on the sea in a storm. That's a hopeless situation. The guy that wrote Amazing Grace was literally pretty much in the biggest storm of his life. It wiped out one of the guys on the ship, and he fought and struggled all night with this ship. And after that, he couldn't help believe in a divine power because they were miraculously saved. So I was that lost ship, brother, in the ocean without a lighthouse, without a light. And man, when you see a light and you're that lost and you see a light on the shore, and you know there's only rocks and impending doom and sharks and storm of the night. It's a scary place out in the ocean at night. And that's hopeless to me, is being that lost ship and not being able to recognize that light.
So let me turn that on you for a minute. Let's play quote unquote devil's advocate with you, okay?
Please.
So you've been to all these dark places in your life. You've opened all these dark doors. You say that you were hopeless at one point, that you were found. You've said yourself 1 people about what God and Jesus did for you.
Yep.
What about those people that look at you and go, yeah, I'm not listening to that guy. I mean, he did all of this stuff, and now on the backside of it, now that he's quote unquote saved or whatever it is, now he's going to tell me how to do it. What do you say to someone like that?
Look, if you want some amazing sound, incredible business advice, you go to you go to Elon Musk, right? You go to Elon Musk. If you want to know how to get out of the darkest place in your life, you go to Jimmy Watson, who actually was saved by Jesus. I'm not trying to sell myself to go to me, but I'm saying you go to someone that's been there and done that. I've been there and done that. And I truly believe that's why God uses me now. And it's a heavy burden to bear, brother. It's not taken lightly. I have many regrets. I have to live with plagues of shame and guilt at times that come across me, that I have to just disseminate out of my body, like dark memories that pop up, and I have to remember what happened to me, and how I was saved from it.
When those memories pop up, when those thoughts pop up, do you ever look at yourself, even briefly for a moment, look at yourself and go, man, I was a fucking horrible person?
There's times that I can literally be walking in the middle of the day, and I have to stop, and I literally go, like I have to take some serious box breathing, and I have to let it leave me. I have to let it leave me. Either from thoughts of war, it's not like, when I say bad, I'm not talking about sex trafficking. I actually hunted those guys down, was saved in America and California and stuff. But I'm talking about that dark side of the world that you can get into with mercenary stuff, all kinds of different stuff. But there's times where memories come, times where I just completely neglected my little brother. I didn't hug him on our last visit together because I was too hard. I was too hard for all that shit. I was too hard for anybody. I had developed such a mass, brother, in such a thick body armor on me, such a facade that nothing could penetrate this. Nothing. At Nothing could penetrate this to the point where I was willing to neglect everyone that I loved. I was willing to throw away a beautiful relationship like this. I was willing to throw away all my money. I was willing to throw away my own life. That's hopeless.
One last word for you. Scandal. You've heard it pop up a lot in your career, in your life. You talk about it very candidly. Scandal.
Scandalism. I don't know. I've heard fraud more than scandal. I don't know. I don't know about scandal, but I've been part of some pretty big political events that would be considered highly controversial.
Do you think that everything that's happened to you, whether you use the word scandal, whether you use, I don't know, I don't even know what word you might use. Do you think that that has all culminated in the person you are, or do you still think that there's more to change a little bit?
What do you mean? I want to think about this.
So when you look back on everything, when you look back on the Blackwater thing, we can get into it in a minute. There was, I would say that's considered a scandal. When
Big
you
political thing. Yep.
Right. When you look back on that, when you look back on the McAfee instance, and we'll get into that a little bit, that would be considered scandal. But you learn, I have a feeling in as much research as I've done on you and stuff, that you've learned every step of the way. You've kind of changed the way you move each time you've done it. Do you still think that there's more room to move around, or do you think that you're getting pretty close to the person that you want to be?
I am on a spiritual journey of awakening, man. Look, right when I think, brother, that I've got it all figured out, right when I think I've been there, done that, or it can't be bad, or it can't, can't get any better. I'll tell you what, that's when we are most vulnerable. The samurai soldier said, when you win in battle, the first thing you do is you strap down the chin straps. And so I have learned from my mistakes in that regards. I have a lot of failures. I have some super high apexes, right? That some don't get to experience. I feel very, very fortunate for that. But I also have these tragedies and some really dark stuff that I've had to live with. And who would want to live with that with compounding interest? Who would want to live with that more, right? And so, man, I always have a lot of room for growth and learning, and that's why I'm always adjusting and learning from my situations and trying to do better every day.
All right, so let's go into each one individually. The Marine Corps, when you go in there, I want to kind of talk about your mental state the first time, because you did 2 deployments with the Marines, correct?
Correct.
Okay. So I want to talk about kind of the guy, and we've talked about a little bit before about that internal struggle going on. But when you go into combat, or when you go and you do the job that you've always wanted to do as a kid, when you're finally there, sights, sounds, smells, I want to know how you felt when you first experience it and it's real for the first time.
Oh man, it was real as it gets. I remember waiting in this holding area before the buses come and pick you up. And I talked a big game. I wanted to be a SEAL, but all I could take at the time was the Marines, and that was plenty to bite off of. And so when the bus came, picked us up, they put these spotlights in your face. You go stand on these footprints, these boot prints in MCRD, and nothing changes. I love the tradition of the United States Marines because they're hardcore. The tradition stays the same. Not much changes. And so you keep that brotherhood, that unity, right? That family. And so when we got off the bus, these spotlights hit us. They start yelling at us, and I'm like, okay, this ain't so bad, right? We get into the processing center, and I don't realize what's coming. We eventually, after like a week, go to our actual platoon. And so I thought at the time I was going through the actual platoon, right? Well, we get to this our real platoon. I think mine was 1027 at MCRD, Charlie platoon. And I get there and I get just sucker punched by one of the drill instructors. When I tell him I'm the youngest guy, they made the youngest guy raise their hand. I stupidly raised it. He came and sucker punched me, and it was just as bad or worse when you're living it than Full Metal Jacket. I couldn't believe it that they could do that to you. And so, but the smell of Bulldog, the cleaners, having to, I can't remember what they call it, but wipe the deck with your hands and do that. It was fun, but it was also like, man, this is real life. This is real. And I can remember guys crying at night in their racks, and it was MCRD, so it was San Diego, and you could hear the airplanes going by. And I started to go, man, I wish I was back home with mom. I wish I was back home with dad, even though they worked me real hard on the farm. And I could hear like guys sniffling in their racks and stuff. And then the drill instructor, Staff Sergeant McNulty, we called him McNutty, would literally come in and just stomp my toothpaste in, get it all over the place, yank us out of the racks. They called them rack monkeys. They smelled like alcohol. I don't think it's like that anymore, probably. Surely not.
So you are experiencing it in your life when you deploy for the first time. Are you feeling like I got a handle on this? I know what I'm doing. Is that warrior mentality starting to kick into you?
Yeah, you think you're 7 foot of just pure steel, iron steel. I wasn't like but a buck 46 1, and I came out of the boot camp thinking I had already won World War III by myself. With my platoon. They make you believe that, which is super important when you're charging machine gun nests. But I remember I came home on that 30 days leave, and I was so proud of myself for accomplishing that short time, that 3 months in the boot camp. Got my EGA. I'm proud to be American Song on top of Reaper. I go home, and it was beautiful, man. I'm eating these Snickers bars. My mom's feeding me as fast as she can. She can't believe how skinny and frail I look. Man, I saw some pictures of me a while back. I just couldn't believe it. Looks like I would look like I was sick, but I thought I was badass.
Your Marine career, can we just give it an overview, what you learned from it, how you became, in a way, the man that you are right now?
We grow through these situations. And how can I say it? But, we learn from whoever's teaching us that masculinity strengthens masculinity. So it can do the opposite. So my senior Marines would literally freaking just haze us, like beat us, haze us, do all kinds of weird stuff. You're mixing mustard gas with your gas mask on, cleaning your toilet with half a grapefruit, then they make you eat it. I mean, crazy stuff. And you're doing field days every Thursday. Well, when I was going through that, I remember telling myself, I am never, ever going to treat my Marines when I'm a senior Marine like my senior Marines did to me, because it was terrible, right? Guess what happens? When I become a senior Marine, I think I'm salty. I'm a corporal at the time, get back from my first deployment. I treated my Marines, my boots, notice I call them boots, my young Marines, the same exact way I was treated. I knew nothing different. I knew nothing else. As I went into Blackwater, okay, I was a little different. I started watching other leaders. I understood a true leader understood what the men's needs actually were. They wanted to work. They were their sled dogs. They wanted to eat. Okay. They wanted to run and gun. And I was going to make sure they did that thing. And so they loved me for doing that as a team leader. And so I fed off of that respect. Whether it was fake or not, we'll never know. But I fed off of that respect. And then you get in the SEAL teams. Now a new guy shows up, right? And I can remember a guy smacking his gum, putting his hands in his pocket as a brand new SEAL at the SEAL Command at STV. And I can remember he was smacking his gum, looking at my best friend Brett Merrihew, Alan Merrihew, that was dead, hanging on the wall. And I mean, this is my best friend, and he's just in a picture frame like this, a picture frame. And he's smacking his gum. He's got his hands in his pocket. And I walked up to him. I was sweating from doing tractor tire flips and sledgehammer. I walked up to him and I said, hey, I said, swallow that gum. And he swallowed the gum. And I said, you're going to meet me out here every single day until I tell you it's over. And his buddy was like, oh, man. I said, shut up. You're going to meet me too here. And so I led by example. I made them show up at like 3:30 in the morning every single morning for a couple months. It was insane considering the workload that we had to do afterwards. But I did everything with them this time, leading by example. I was no longer hazing them. I was hazing myself and them. I was beating us all down. But those guys turned out to be extremely, extremely good SEALs because of that. And so I had to learn. I had to go through phases of my life. And, we would like to think like, oh man, I got it learned now. But who knows? There's a lot to be learned all the time.
So let me ask you then, when you get out of the Marine Corps, nothing really that I can see is a blip mark in the Marine Corps. You're getting out. But I ask the question of a lot of people, you get out of the military, you don't want to do that anymore, but you go into contracting. What was the reason for leaving the Marine Corps and going into contracting?
I remember Force Recon came by our platoon because I was in a security platoon. It's like a kind of an amped up version of an infantry platoon. I was 0311. We thought we were cool, but you can only be so cool, when you got muskets basically for M16s and A2s. And I can remember Force Recon came by and they offered us a slot to go try out and basically walk on the Force Recon slot, if we passed all the schools, right? Because they knew us well. We had worked with them and stuff on the visit board search and seizures and stuff. Well, I remember turning down that spot because I wanted to be a SEAL. And I did my 4 in the Corps and it was just, I was tired of it and the living conditions were bad. And so I wasn't getting out of the Marine Corps with a focus on Blackwater. I was getting out of the Marine Corps with a focus on the SEALs.
Okay, so I guess the same question would be, then what's that thing in the middle? Why is it that you do that?
Well, I got so sick and tired of the living in a flat tops in the Marines. And so I was ready to get out. I get out and I want to do the SEALs, right? But I didn't feel like I had what it took mentally. So I had to take ASVABs again. I had to go to this big process, gauntlet of tests and stuff. And I realized that I was coming up short, but I had a chance and opportunity to go to Blackwater. But one thing I was doing, brother, was I was moving forward every single day. Even in the black of night, if you just move forward, I tell guys all the time, pick a point down the hallway, the dark hallway, because life is a dark hallway. And sometimes you can't see nothing but a little crease of light coming from a door at the very end of that hallway. But it's not like you're going to make it to that door. Okay, you want to be an astronaut, then go for the astronaut position. Are you going to be an astronaut? Probably not. But on the way, a door is going to open, but you have to be moving forward. For some reason, universally speaking, you got to be moving forward down this dark hallway towards whatever that is, for that door to open up, and then you bang a right or a left, 90 degrees into that opportunity.
I guess the big thing that I'm just trying to figure out, because it's the biggest kind of question mark with you, with me, and everything that I've done about, us meeting together, is you say over and over that you weren't ready, but you're jumping into contracting and not even contracting. You're going to Blackwater. You're going to be in the middle of stuff. I'm just trying to figure out what it was that you thought that you were missing to be a SEAL, but not missing to go contracting, because you're doing not the same thing, but you're in the same environments, would you say?
Well, yeah, of course, you're in war, but unfortunately, okay, to be a SEAL and to go to war, you got to pass certain aptitude tests, right? They put stringent things like you got to know math, you got to know physics to go kill a bad guy. In Blackwater, it was like, send me your resume, you're going to war. I thought it was like the fast lane to war, actually. And I felt
Okay.
like it was just awesome timing.
When you do your time in Blackwater, how do you think that you're changing from your days in the Marine Corps, from being a corporal, getting out, you were, starting to move your way up through the ranks. You go to Blackwater. How do you think you as a person are changing now that you're doing this? Because you just said yourself that it was the fast road to go to war. Do you see yourself changing as a person?
Lightning speed, lightning fast. One small short deployment in a war is like a 20-year career in the Army or Marines or whatever, even in the SEALs. There's something that happens in war. You be there a month long and you look like one hard ass salty dog, war dog. And that's what happened with Blackwater. I showed up having a lot of experience from the Marine Corps relative to where we're at. And I feel like a green new guy in Baghdad, Iraq with a whole different unit with Blackwater. But as I went along, you just learn super fast when rounds are flying at you. A rocket, a 74 millimeter Russian rocket or Iranian made rocket, like the size of a telephone, crashes down in front of you. You hit the ground like a coward, right? The guy that's been there 2 more months than you has this cool medical go bag. He jumps up off the ground, runs into the fire, into the smoke, basically as the explosion's going off. He's running into it to find the wounded or help the deceased, whatever the case. When I saw that, it only took one round to hit and one guy to run into that for me to follow suit.
Well, I don't think we should, gloss over it at all. When you're over there, you're in, from what I understand, Kabul, you're in Baghdad, you have leadership roles as an agent in charge, you're a counter assault team leader. Like you're really putting it in over there. And I think it all kind of taxis up to when your incident happens. Can we talk about that and kind of the aftermath? And the reason I want to talk about the aftermath of what happened was you said you're changing at lightning speed. I know from doing the job that I've done for almost 20 years that when certain things happen, you change what you're doing. And sometimes it can be a setback even. Let's talk about what happened and then how it changed you as it was ending.
Yeah, it changed me drastically from this brand new guy in Blackwater to riding in the trunk monkey to working every position in the convoy, from the driver to the tactical commander to the turret gunner to a little bird door gunner to team leader to agent in charge, as you said, to the drug charge minister in Kabul, to start up clandestine teams there and traveling long distances, Helmand Province, all this stuff, Lashkar. And so you're developing through this whole time in all these different positions. They had a ton of things you could do in Blackwater. And finally, I found my niche in the red cell teams of the tactical support teams or quick reaction or counter assault teams, you could call them. They had like 3 or 4 names over the years, from Templar Knights to Raven and stuff. And so when I became the team leader of this group, I knew the job. I really loved holding pizza parties, getting beer and cigarettes for the guys, and holding these big parties and giving to the guys and rewarding them for such a good job. Protecting this person, saving this National Guard team, saving these bodies, saving these Iraqis and stuff. And so we were rolling and going, but it was lightning fast. And things were happening like this every single day. A guy would die here. Another guy would get wounded here. You go visit 2 guys that get their arms blown off or whatever in Blackwater, and then you see 4 Army guys die one by one from a grenade going in their turret. And now the very next day, you're in a firefight at Almanat City Hall. You stop, and a guy runs by and tries to dink a tennis ball, a grenade in your turret. And so you're like, I don't want to burn alive like I saw those Marines in that one tank that one day. And now you're hoping a freaking gust of wind comes by and heats up the situation because you don't want to hear that stuff. You don't want to see it. You're just hoping for a quick death for them because when it's so hot, you can't get to them. This ain't the movies. It's hell on earth. So the next day, I hear this grenade hit the turret, ding, 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 and I'm out of there because I have this image now of 4 Army guys dying literally one by one, a priest, like the movies, a priest and a surgeon going by one. and covered in blood and them screaming and from the same thing. And I tell myself that I'm saving a bullet for myself. I'm never going to be caught in one. And I'm never going to be sitting in a Humvee or a tactical support vehicle and allow a grenade just to come in the turret and just wipe us out like fish. So I jump out, get hit by a little shrapnel, a little bit, with the door open, playing this grenade tennis. Maybe 2 days later, you have a big bomb go off, and a team says that they've been hit on the radio, and you got bandages on your leg, you're limping around like a weirdo. You've got your whole team you're looking after. The team I just left was blown up. The guy was launched out, lost his arm, lost a really nice tattoo on that one. And then the other guy was in a coma, his head swollen up like this. And these are guys you just drank beer with the night before. And now a big bomb goes off, vexates the windows like you're in a 747 and just hit turbulence, and the thing's a mile away. That's a big bomb. And so now you spin up the team, the Nisar Square, Baghdad's Bloody Sunday, and all I can think of is, oh my God, they just hit a team again. That massive explosion, that mushroom cloud, that vexation of the windows is a team in Blackwater that just got pulverized. And so, of course, shrapnel's in my leg. Bomb just goes off. My buddies are dying everywhere. Yeah, I'm taking my team out into the fire. I'm taking my team out into the fray. No matter what happens to me, no matter if I die, I die. Who cares? That was my entire ethos, my motto, my whole life. If I die, I die. I'm not going to live with regrets. I'm not going to live with regrets that I allowed a team to die. So we go out the gate, and I can remember my tactical commander saying, Haas, what do you want to do? They call me Haas. Haas, what do you want to do? And I can just remember I had this feeling inside my body. If I go out that gate, then my life is going to change forever, ever. If I die, or if something else. I didn't know the darkness, the years of turmoil and legal problems and everything else. I knew something was ominous and dark, and it's like a storm was coming, that it was unavoidable. Because I had to make a split-second decision. I thought about the other day, man, how old I was. I always thought I was old and bold and a warrior and stuff at that age. I was like 26 years old, No, I was like 24 or 25 years old. It's kind of hard for me to even think of me making okay decisions at 24 years old. Yeah, that's a man, but there's a lot to learn. And you got all these 20, 24-year-old guys with machine guns, man, and getting in this big firefight. And we got in a massive firefight. And forever, my life would change after that. And a lot of lives. A lot of innocent were killed in the firefight. A Marine battalion commander once said, show me a battalion and I'll show you a My Lai massacre. He was speaking of the Vietnam War. Do people really think the My Lai massacre was the only incident that was called the My Lai massacre in Vietnam? There were many events in Vietnam that were very similar, but the thing that these two had in common that I believe, or maybe helps me sleep at night, let's just put it that way, is that they both had a very big imprint on ending the war in Iraq, stopping a lot of nonsense, okay? But the thing that the My Lai massacre in the Nisar Square did not have in common was a massacre in the sense that civilians were lined up in a ditch and shot in the back of the head. Now, I'm not the one to judge the My Lai massacre in Vietnam because I wasn't there. And I learned that real quick, I used to watch CNN and stuff and the news and kind of believe stuff back in the day. But after Nisar Square, I didn't believe nothing after seeing it on the news and what they did to those guys.
This episode brought to you by Max Belts. Guys, are you looking for a perfect accessory to wear every single day for every single scenario? Well, you've come to the right place. We all know that nothing stands up to wear and tear like a good leather belt. If you're looking for the toughest leather belt on earth, then you've come to the right place. Max Belts. They're handcrafted in the USA by veterans who are serious about their craft. And if you're looking for a belt that's tough enough for your active lifestyle and help support those who've given so much to our country, look no further than Max Belts. It's the toughest belt on the planet. It's a perfect solution for casual or dress wear and ideal for utility and firearm carry. It's the highest caliber of American craftsmanship, and it also positively impacts our military charity partners. Once again, Max Belts, you can't go wrong with them. I wear them every day. They're the toughest belt on earth. And you can find all of this and so much more at maxbelts.com. Okay, so is that because you've told me you have a ton of regrets in life? Do you have regrets of that day?
Yeah, I do. I absolutely do. I absolutely do. Because I could have never known what I do now. Fast forward. I could have never known that team that we thought was blown up when the windows were vexated, when the smoke went up like this, and they yelled on the comms that they were hit. When they said all that, you just believed that they were hit. I could have never known that they were actually not destroyed because we were already out the gate when they said that they were returning, as if they didn't get hit. Well, you can't just turn around an entire convoy. You have to go in. So the rest is history. And so do I regret actually going out? Well, I don't even have a choice now but to say, well, of course. I had to live with 4 guys going to prison for what I thought would be their life until Donald Trump pardoned them.
I'm trying to think how to say this. Do you regret making a snap decision, and did it change the way that you made decisions? Because you said when we first started talking about this, when you saw the bomb go off, you heard it come over the radio, you were not going to let those guys die out there. You were going to take a team out there. Do you regret now, or do you make your decisions differently now, and maybe not slower, but weigh everything?
You have to weigh everything. And, that was one of those situations I don't know or think I could have done it differently because of how fast it happened and considering all the incidences I told you very quickly lining up. And there was much, much more, right? But now, man, I know in the SEALs later on after that, I remember guys being a little more rambunctious and wild and stuff. But man, I'll tell you what, after something like that, you dot your I's, you cross your T's. You just don't mess up. You don't make rash decisions because you see how fragile that life is. You see how in an instant, not only your life, but innocent people can be it's over. And that was a very, very nightmarish experience to live through. I mean, I can't imagine what the other guys went through, what the families went through of all the Iraq war. I mean, so senseless too, brother. To go there thinking that we were doing something, brainwashed, and to look back now, it makes it even worse to think that we went there for no reason whatsoever. No, there was no weapons of mass destruction and or anything, and to think of all that devastation is very difficult to process, and probably another reason why I have just blacked it out, actually through trauma. Trauma mechanisms will actually literally black out certain parts of your life that you forgot literally happened. There's trauma in people's life that they don't even know happened to them because our mind is pretty brilliant at surviving, and it just blacks it out unless you go to therapy and start dragging it out.
When you think about that kind of stuff, because I know it has to come up, we've talked about it before. Are you worried that stuff that's blacked out, that stuff that has locked itself away in that file cabinet, are you scared it's ever going to pop up?
I'm not anymore, brother, because after my meet with Jesus moment, after that divine experience I had with God, it was so powerful. It was so head down to the toe. Even my shoulder was healed. in an instant. I'm telling you, after that moment, it was like the big okay, like A plus, my first A plus in life from God. It was like God was saying, Jimmy, I know all your mistakes, and I know that man may never forget your mistakes, Jimmy. And I know you've gone through hell, and I know you've given some hell back, but in spite of all of that, he was willing to meet me in the darkest time of my life and give me the okay, the validation that I so desperately needed my whole life, that I was searching for. I mean, look at all these titles, Marine, Blackwater. All it is it's the love for the country, and then it goes to seeking validation, trying to find validation from somewhere, you know?
All right, well, let's seek the final validation. Let's talk about that, the Navy SEAL route where you do it. I really want to talk about the SDV stuff with it because a lot of people don't talk about that stuff. And the SDV was actually where you were injured extremely bad. Let's talk about the SDV a little bit. Let's talk about you finally reaching your career. We've talked about when you make it, your dad says you're almost there. You're proud. You're a SEAL. You're doing all these things. Let's talk about SDV and why that was so important to you in your career.
Oh man, so these guys came by our class, these SEALs, and they looked important. You know, they weren't the instructors. No offense to the instructors, but they looked important. And they came by our class right when we were about to graduate, right when we were about to pick our dream sheet. Because you get a dream sheet when you're about to graduate SQT after two and some change years, and you get your list. And I really kind of was set on the West Coast. I always liked the West Coast, you know, the Marines. And so I was going to pick a West Coast team. All of a sudden, these guys from SDV come down and they said, basically, you might die doing this. You know, it's very dangerous. You're going to get injured. Okay. You're going to do some extremely top secret stuff, like super like the next level. And they were alluding to a lot of this without even telling us much. They didn't have to say much. I was all in on that. And I remember I was the only guy and one other dude from my entire class that volunteered for it. Another reason why I volunteered for SDV, the Little Black Subs, is I had already done the land side. I had already done just a tons and tons of missions and deployments, and I was like the desert turtle, my dad used to say, you know, and I had already done this crap. And so for me, it was much more exciting to go into something so secretive and so interesting
And so cold and so wet.
and so stupid and miserable and horrible. Yeah. It was bad. And people warned me, guys warned me, they said, do not go to SDV. Do not go. You know, I think Goggins was there a year and he was like, I'm going to go do some ultra marathons, man. I'll see you guys later, you know?
So what'd you think about it when you do it and you're actually a part of it? I've got some guys that listen to the show that really want to know about SDV. They said that a lot of people don't talk about it. I don't know how much you can really talk about it, but they want to understand what it's like to be in those little subs, to be in blacked out conditions, very minimal instrumentation to use. Can you just kind of run us through, not necessarily an exact mission, but what it's like to launch, to go through the mission, and then to extract out in one?
Yeah, exactly. I can't talk about capabilities. And I will say the reason why, you know, you see even books about the Osama bin Laden raid, SEAL Team 6, that's how classified SDV is there's nothing about it. It's super. So I have to be super eggshell careful here. But I will say it's ice cold. You know, it's like getting in an ice bath, right? You can't see your hand in front of you. You literally can't see your hand in front of you. So you're working like this all the time with your gear, and it's very highly claustrophobic. Okay, you fit a certain amount of guys in the back, certain amount in the front, and when you close that door, I remember the first time they told me to get in the STV, I was like, where? Because you're on top of the water like this at night in a harbor, right? And then the SDV's floating somewhere right here underneath, right underneath the surface. Okay. And I remember this little hole was like this big to enter it. And it was so small. And you had to enter head first into this hole, into this black tube. And I could just remember, like, dude, what have I done? And you heard about, guys, it's an all volunteer unit. You hear about SEALs going there, and then they quit. They're like, dude, no, I'm not doing this. I mean, these are SEALs, man, that are quitting at SCV. And so that's why they made it all volunteer, because they realized they can't force a guy to do this. You literally can't force a guy to do this. He won't do it. If he ain't doing it, he ain't doing it. And I remember getting up to that little black hole in the black water, in the black sub, and I can remember saying, like, there, like, you want me to? And they were like, get in, bro. And I was like, I don't like I was like kind of paralyzed. I didn't want to get in because it seemed so unnatural. And so they literally just squeeze you through head first. You feel super vulnerable, and so you get in. And once you get in, they start putting guys in there with you. Okay. Now you add weapons, you add packs, you add, I can't say the different types of dive equipment that we use. Okay. Some seriously advanced stuff. And so you put all that stuff on, and there's guys back there, plural, and there's literally no room. You can't raise your hand. The only thing you can do is hold an emergency octopus regulator that's floating around like this, and just hold it with dear life, and hold your mask with the other, because you'll get kicked in the face by a guy. And then you're all back there, and they slide the door over you now, and they literally have to put their boot on you to push you down in your big wetsuit or dry suit, which, by the way, is freezing cold when you're compressed. It doesn't matter. It just doesn't matter. They press you
Not to
down.
mention a dry suit when you get air inside it and it flips your
It does.
body around. Yeah, fuck those things. I hate them.
They leak, and it can be worse. Trap water, now you're hypothermic. So they push you down with the boot. They slide that door over, and now you're in there for literally hours. And you're holding your regulator, you're holding your mask. And I think the terrible thing about it is this: if you have a rig malfunction, what are you going to do? You
Nothing.
can't do anything. You really can't do much, okay, without going into detail. So you pretty much die, or something bad happens, right? And so there's not any room for error. And obviously, to get good at this, you have to do it all the time. And another thing is, you can't feel your hands, and you have an involuntary gasping reflex. And so, if your mask gets bumped off, or you take your mask off, like Schellenberg did at STV and died, and then you change out your mask, you have that involuntary like that. And the only way to control that is to grit your teeth together like this, as hard as you can, in the ice cold water. So like this. And when you do that, that prevents you from just asphyxiating, or taking down that salt water in your lungs and then coming back up and heaving back. So it's a very serious job, obviously, right?
Well, I want to talk about your injury that you had, because you had an air gas embolism, which I think you should explain, because that's a horrible injury to have. Tacked on top of that, I think it results in part of a TBI because you hit your head, and then you're not put into a chamber. And if anybody has not dove in, that's listening to this conversation, a chamber is the most important thing during an embolism. And it took like 4 days to get you in one. So let's talk about that injury and how it started the end of your career.
Yeah, so it's always on the easy day. You always need to be aware on the easy day, but that's when you start messing around. That's when you joke and smoke. And so we were doing a relatively easy dive during the day. You could see the guys in a harbor. It's very hard, anyways. But you could see the guys, a few feet away. The sun's coming down. It's the weekend. The 4th of July weekend's coming up. We're doing, I believe it was one last visit, board search and seizure of a ship, where we're coming up and we're taking our gear off. We come up slowly, FSA, free service ascent, and then not to go past your bubbles. And then we come up out of the ocean, and then take the ship down, and then we were jumping back off into the water on a breath hold. Well, you're pretty hypoxic, right? So you got to find your gear underneath the water. So as we did this second iteration, I was pretty hypoxic, but I found my gear underwater. I start putting it on. I down the mask, down the regulator, undo the Draeger, and to avoid a caustic cocktail. And then all of a sudden, I just wake up in my buddy's arms. I remember just like in shock, like, bro, we're supposed to be down on the bottom of the ocean floor in the harbor, and now I'm in your hands, and he's slapping me in the face, which you're not supposed to do, by the way, because you have the fight or flight mechanisms. And so I'm confused, brother. I'm like, what happened, man? And he said, you were seasoned out underwater. Well, he thought I was a shark when I bumped into him unexpectedly. He cracked my secumars, rocketed me to the surface. So that was his depiction of the story. And then when I got to the surface, he was slapping me in the face pretty hard, actually. Still remember that slap. And I was just staring at him, like in his arms. And he was holding me tight. He was real strong. Guy's name was Knuckles. So they heaved me on the boat. Of course, I want to go back down. And the dive medical officer says, are you okay? And my buddy's like, no, he's not okay. And I'm like, yeah, I'm okay. Send me back down. And she's like, no, you're not going nowhere. And my buddy was like, look, Jimmy was seizing out underwater. He needs to get to the chamber. And she does a neurological on me, and I'm fine. Of course, I'm putting on my best, like spell spaghetti backwards. Well, who can do that anyways, right? And so we go through this neurological exam. I pass it according to her. But the dive manual is extremely specific. When in doubt, press out. If he's seizing underwater, if the diver is seizing underwater, you press him. You put him in the dive chamber. Man, I've had to find some forgiveness for this one. And so instead of putting me in the dive chamber and compressing me, putting me at depth in the chamber, she sends me home on 4th of July weekend. And at the time, I didn't realize I had an arterial gas embolism, and they think it was a bubble in my C5 or somewhere. In either way, it was a very traumatic thing, because if you have an air gas embolism, you have to be chambered pretty much within a certain amount of time, very soon after, and everything will be okay. Because guys would get injured all the time there, or not all the time, but it happened quite often, and they would spin up the team. And so they don't put me in the team. I have to go back home, and I'm like dying. Like, I don't feel right.
Well, that's what I was going to ask you. I know with all the diving that I've done, you had to not feel good.
No, I felt weird, and so I started drinking beers because you're agitated. Yeah, you're agitated from the Draeger. Yeah, exactly. I started drinking.
I like to drink beer when I'm agitated too.
Yeah. You're diving the Draeger LAR5. You're pissed off all the time. There's something about it that pisses you off. It's not like Puro 2 in Cancun with your buddies drinking Mai Tais. You're breathing that hot air bag. It's a big weighted necklace around your neck. It's dragging you down, and so you're pissed off. And so I just thought I was super agitated from the weeks of diving, but something was wrong, and I ended up drinking some beers. I drink a bunch of beer, and I'm like, man, something ain't right, but it chills me out. I feel anxious, super anxious. I lay down that night, wake up, half my body's paralyzed. I know something super is bad now. I could feel my body, but it was like paralyzed, just like a line was drawn down my body. And I was laying on the couch. My dog is next to me, whimpering like old Lassie. Tookie. Man, Tookie passed away. I'm so sad about that. But Tookie was laying next to me. That's right, Tookie. And he was whimpering and it's like he knew something was wrong with me. Everyone knew something was wrong with me. I tell my wife, I said, baby, it looks like I may not make it because they didn't chamber me, but I love you. I'm gonna go lay down on the ground outside. I didn't want to die in front of her in the house. So I go downstairs. I lay in the street on the near the Alawai Canal in Hawaii there, and she called my chief to come pick me up. He races up. He says, I'm gonna run this chamber if I got to, if whatever I got to do, I'm gonna do it." And he's a SEAL chief, and he's gonna do anything for his boys. And so he drives me to the chamber. Right before I get there, the dive medical officer who made this original ridiculous call tells my chief to stand down and take me back to the emergency room at Tripler Army Medical.
Okay. I got to ask a couple questions here before you go to the Pink Palace. So
You know all about the Pink Palace, man.
that's where my wife worked when we met.
Yeah.
Okay. So my question would be, she ran the neurological on you. That's how she made her decision. But that's not what you base a chamber visit on, is a neurological. Yes, it has something to do with it, but it's not based on why you would put someone in a chamber. So I guess I'm not understanding why this dive medical officer, why no one, the dive soup, anybody like that is not overriding this dive medical officer, even the dive commander, whatever, because the neurological has very little to do with putting someone in the chamber. And now this is twice that they've said not the chamber. Were they worried about the manpower? Were they worried about the cost of running the chamber? What was it that was stopping this chamber from happening? Because that's the first thing you're going to do.
At any second, she could have reversed her incredibly, ridiculously stupid decision to not chamber me. Okay? Of course, I don't want to be chambered, but it's not up to me. I literally said, I'm good to go, like any SEAL. In the SEALs, you don't say, like, oh, I'm feeling bad, I need to go chamber. No, it ain't like that, But she and all the other guys were like, chamber him. He needs to be chambered. She made this decisive, young medical doctor decision based off her studies in medical school. She didn't want to be embarrassed now to reverse a terrible call right on one of her first days of the duty. We have badass doctors at SDV, make no mistake. But those guys were on deployment. Okay, she was back there with us as we were training. She makes this horrendous call. She doesn't reverse it. In fact, she goes all in now with all the chips. It says, no, he's okay. I said, get him to the emergency room. And they're like, ma'am, he's 30 years old, perfect shape, in perfect shape, perfect health. He was diving. Now he's literally doing the funky floppy chicken on the ground near the Alawai Canal in Hawaii. Oh, man. And so they take me and put me in Tripler again. That's the second time, by the way. It's a long story, but a second time. And while I'm there, man, I just totally give up. I just say, well, it's been 4 days now. I know I had a bad dive accident, and it's over for me. And my wife's there, and I told her something like this could happen. I was very realistic. I said, look, baby, if we get married, just know we could go to World War III. I could be gone for years in a war somewhere. Who knows what could happen? Just full disclosure. Or I could die. I could die at a young age in the SEALs. It's not a mystery. Or injured. And she said, okay. And here we are, 6 months married, maybe less than that. And she's standing over me, and I'm blacking out in ICU. And it's over for me. About when I was about at a zero, I was 1 or 2, 0 being dead. About that time, the head doctor of the whole hospital happened to walk by. Tripler's a big hospital. He happened to
Huge
walk.
hospital.
Huge. The head guy in this white, the white coat over the suit. They're important when they're wearing a suit, and then the white coat and the pins and the clipboard. And he walked by with a bunch of staffers, and he walked by fast. But I was sitting there hunched over like this with an IV, and all they were doing was giving me morphine, basically waiting for me to pass. And I remember he stopped, and he came in my room, and he said, "Hey, you, wake up." And I kind of looked up at him, and he said, "What are you in here for? I've seen you before." like 3 days ago. He goes, what are you doing here again? And I said, I'm 30 years old. I'm a Navy SEAL. I was diving and now I'm dying. That's all I could say. And he just blew up and said, get this guy to the dive chamber immediately. And man, they scrambled and grabbed me, carried me out there, put me in the dive chamber, probably at a 1-0 being dead. I mean, I was done, man. And they did 9 extension nines, like 13 rides in the dive chamber at 9 hours each. Okay, don't quote me on that, but I know it was 13 times, 1 day off, so 14 days straight at nines with pure O2, taking the O2 on and off. And man, it was cold,
And
it
then
was
hot, and then cold.
freezing hot. Yeah, and you feel like I felt like I was going to seize out all the time from the pure O2 they were giving me. O2 toxicity, and it was so cramped in there. And man, it was absolute crazy. It was bad.
What chamber did they take you to? The Pearl Harbor chamber?
Mud Sioux.
Okay.
You remember Mud Sioux? I,
Yeah,
I
yeah,
think
yeah.
that,
That's where they took all the civilians too.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
anybody that had a dive accident. Yeah. So you were there 2 weeks. You were pretty much living in the chamber.
I was living in there. I stayed all day long, and then I would sleep in a little room next to the chamber, and then come in. And I started to improve drastically after about 2 rides. I started to improve, but by then, the air embolism, okay, is crushed. Like it's not there anymore. The bubble, this is my understanding of it, but the bubble is gone, they said. So now it's just damage control trying to oxygenate whatever damage has been done in the brain.
Well, and I think too that once that big bubble breaks, you got to worry about all the little tiny ones too, because you're still trying to push them through the system.
Yeah, exactly.
So let's talk about how this kind of ends your career.
Yeah, it's a super long, crazy story, but basically what happens is I remain in the teams. I start to make a recovery. It takes me a while. I got to go to James Haley Veterans Hospital. It's a very dark time in my life. I'm right up here and now I'm down here. The symptoms were so bad. I would stand up, blackout, pass out, pre-syncope episodes, all this stuff. Well, I start to climb out of this, and I start to be able to run with the team again and to do stuff and be a team leader again. And it was pretty incredible. Go to sniper school. And so during this time, or right when we got back from the deployment, I had pretty much, it was never the same again. It's like a
Of
fan
course.
going off. It was never the same. But I was able to somehow freaking operate, which is a miracle. And then when we got back from the deployment, I went to sniper school. And while I was there, my lawyer said, look, that Blackwater case has been re-drummed up. You're going to have to testify. I said, I don't want to testify. I thought that was done. The case was dismissed by prosecutorial misconduct at the time. And so it was kind of like a nightmare, man, to be in the SEALs. And then all of a sudden this whole situation was drummed back up for the Blackwater thing. Like it just wouldn't go away. And so here we go. I go testify from sniper school. And then I'm at my command one day. And my lawyer told me, my lawyer was Monica Lewinsky's lawyer, Preston Burton, paid by Blackwater Insurance. And I remember he said, Jimmy, if you don't play ball with the DOJ, they want to send a message to you. They're going to come after you, man. And they're going to burn you to the ground if you don't play ball. I said, tell them to do what they got to do. I'm gonna testify just like I've been testifying. And as long as you told the truth, you're okay. You're not committing perjury, because they'll charge you with perjury if they don't like you, if you tell these untruths. And so I went in over the course of several years of testifying, and then one day I was called into my command, and they said I had 10 days left to get out of the Navy. And this was a commander of mine who had been with me through the whole injury ordeal, cookouts first name basis. And so that was extremely hard to hear from him. And then I said to him, I said, I'm not going anywhere. I worked my whole life for this, blood, sweat, and tears. And he says, you don't understand. You don't have a choice. You're literally getting kicked out in 10 days. And I said, well, I'm not going nowhere. He says, you don't understand, Jimmy. You're charging a machine gun nest. And I know he was playing off of my time in the Marine Corps when he said that, or at least I thought he was. And I was like, well, sir, if Marines didn't charge machine gun nest, then we wouldn't be sitting here right now talking. And so he realized that I was going to fight to the end. And that's what I did. And it took another 2 years of fighting like hell, but I lasted a lot longer than 10 days and left on my own terms, retired out of the SEALs, but it was not fun. It was very difficult. It was the same time as Eddie Gallagher went through his whole ordeal and where they tragically went after him. And it was really sorry what they did to him. I later learned that they did it to a bunch of SEALs out there. Some of the SEALs took the deal, But when I first went into the recruiter for the SEALs, I said SEAL or no deal. It was all in for me, no matter what. And so here I was, forced to fight for what I felt like was my life in multiple cases. And by the grace of God, by that Watson's don't quit attitude my dad implied to me, even in the darkest hour, I just kept throwing one foot in front of the other, brother.
I want to talk about your suicide attempt. And the reason I want to talk about that is because we've talked about this whole conversation of putting your foot forward, keeping going forward. You had been through some tremendous, horrible things that had happened. Not to mention, we didn't even get into your brother being killed. You had this stuff that happened with Blackwater. You had your injury in the SEALs. What was it that you think finally pushed you to that? Because you'd been through so much already. You'd fought through so much. Why did that change and give you that point where you thought it's not worth it anymore?
I'll tell you what did it for me. During my time in the teams, I felt like I was high on life sometimes with the accolades and the trident and all this stuff. And pretty much garbage, a lot of it, because when you believe the hype. And so I remember going home. My little brother that I love so much, was in a lot of trouble now. He was doing stuff, and I had to help him clean up his life. I had to leave the SEAL team for a little bit, which is a no-no, but I had to leave and help my little brother. He's doing good for like a year, and I remember I didn't hear from him for a while, and I was checking in on him, giving him motivation talks, bought him a big heavy bag to hit, and I remember I didn't hear from him for a couple of days, and I said, hey, man, what's up? Check in, bro. And it was right near Easter Sunday. And I remember the last text he sent me was, I'm just trying life, man. I'm just trying life. And, to anybody listening right now, there ain't no trying nothing, man. There ain't no trying life. If you try life like my little brother was doing, you might as well just be rolling the dice, playing Russian roulette, and clicking that gun to your head every single day. Because if you just try life, it's going to destroy you and eat you up. There's no try. When people say I'm trying, bro, it's no. You either do it or that's it. There's no other option in this life, in my eyes, from my experience. And so I had to go into surgery for my crush accident. My penis got crushed, and then I wake up out of the surgery.
I don't mean to laugh, but that's a good story. People should listen to that story. But go ahead.
My penis got caught in a bell center. Everybody knows. The whole world knows by now. But I wake up out of anesthesia, and I'm in this weird haze, and all I can tell the doctors is my brother's dead. Dan is dead. Dan is dead. And Obviously, this is still hard. But they said, no, no, it's the anesthesia. It's the anesthesia. It's just a chemical. And I said, no, man. I said, my little brother's dead, man. And then when I came out of this medical stupor from the crush accident, I just knew my little brother was dead. So I go, I have to take over like the hero, save the day with my family because my family's devastated from my little brother's death. And so I had to go clean it up. And when I smelled that smell, I had smelled bodies so many times before, burning, decayed. They're even from the USS Cole, years before that, 20 years before that. I had smelt this, and but when I smelt this new with my brother, when I went in the house and had to do that, a switch went off in my head. And that's when, man, it was just a matter of time before I burned in the same way. Because I didn't care about nothing. And that was hard. That was hard. Because I had to keep it together. I had to keep it together for my family. I had to keep it together. And because I was hard as nails. I was hard on the outside. I'm a little soft now, but I was hard as nails. And uh, I remember, at night I would just dry heave, in the toilet, with the door shut, with the water running at my parents' house. And I was trying to keep it together, you know. And a man can only keep it together for so long, but after a certain amount of things that happen to him, you know, people may judge me for my actions in life, for some of the more questionable or bad actions and stuff. But a man can only take so much, you know. And my world it was like a castle in the sand, and the waves just rolled over it when I smelled my brother, and that flipped that switch in my mind, and I knew that it was pretty much over for me after that. I started having some bad stuff happen.
So let me ask you, with all of this happening, you know that it's important to be the hero, to take over, to take care of the family. And I know you know now what I'm about to say is important. But did it ever cross your mind at that time, at any time, to go, man, I got to take care of myself. I'm starting to fall apart here. I need to talk to someone, whether that be a SEAL buddy, whether that be a wife, a girlfriend, whatever it may be. Did you ever at any point go, man, I have got to get a hold of this? Or did you just not even care to tell them your side?
No, the problem with me is that I felt like everybody's looking up to me, and my brothers they know me as like the Texas tornado. They used to call me Tornado. It's not a good thing if you're nicknamed after a natural disaster, but I was all in with the SEAL teams, and I can remember when I got back from my brother being dead and stuff, and I remember I was slamming like 15 shots of Jack Daniels, doing all kinds of other crazy stuff. I remember the SEALs like saying, "Hey man, how does all this stuff not seem to affect you?" Because I'd be laughing, but Napoleon said you must laugh at man to avoid crying for him, and I was dead inside, man. And so I would just bang out at the moment's notice with anybody. I didn't care about nothing, especially if it was an assault on one of my guys. And so my best friend at the time, Brett Allen Merrihew, he came in and really nurtured me and was like a brother that I could talk to. And I told all my deepest, darkest stuff to, in the garage in my little man cave. And we would talk for hours, have a couple beers, and I would tell him what I was going through. And at the time, she was screening for Demick, and then all of a sudden, I get word that he dies, like tragically. like at a moment's notice. And man, I was one more straw on the camel's back, and it was I was just a cannon, about to explode, man. And I just got lost. I was that lost ship in the night, man.
Well, I think it's interesting. I've heard you say that you have this all male tribe, and I want to get into that in a minute. This all male tribe that you coach and stuff. And I've heard you say you don't want women to be a part of it. And a big reason that you don't want women to be a part of it is not because it's a sexist thing or anything. You say that men will not be vulnerable in front of a woman. They won't be as vulnerable as they will be in front of a bunch of other men. So I'm wondering at what point you learned that, because we're talking about right now, all of this stuff is happening around you. You can look around and see that you have family there that would take care of you. Your mother, your father loved you. The SEAL teams loved you, and you weren't being vulnerable other than to your friend. Then you lose them tragically. At what point do you finally go, fuck, I just got to be vulnerable and I got to get this shit out?
Well, you can only live a facade for so long. You can only live with this, carrying this weight in front of your face and this heavy shield, and then you're just adding to it all the time. And eventually you just break in half and you fall over and collapse and you bury yourself. And I was a dead man walking. And so eventually it all came to a head. I was running from the law. I get wrangled in by the FBI. I go on house arrest with my loving mom. Mama Peacock's there. My dad's there. Talk about disappointing to look at them in the face and see their son who tried so hard and did this and this only to be on house arrest with them now. When I was in chains in the federal penitentiary and they escorted me out to the court in an orange jumper with shackles on the feet and the marshals are walking you two on each side, man, that was the most biggest freaking letdown that I've ever seen in my family's life. Like for me to, but my mom was like, I don't blame you. I don't blame you. You went through too much. You went through literally your mind can only take so much. And so when I say it's an all men's group, it's because I can be vulnerable about like that now because how God literally met me on house arrest. My criminal case was dismissed. I dropped off 2 sea bags of rocks. I can literally be the real man that I was meant to be all along. This is not me with the mask on. Okay. If it does come on, it's very short little stints, but I try to keep it off. I've tried to keep it off for this podcast. I try to remain vulnerable. I can do that. A lot of men have a very difficult time even saying vulnerable or anything. They're like, it by no means it means you're sensitive. It just means the real you is ready to come out after so many years. And that's the power of God. And that's what we're doing, a reigniting purpose in this mighty warrior tribe that I got going on. And it's been pretty dang amazing, life-changing results going on in this thing, man.
Is this the first time in your life? And listen to the question before you answer. I want you to think about it. With this men's group, with the things that you're doing right now, coaching, is this the first time you've been truly proud of what you're doing?
No.
The reason I ask you that is because when we talk about Blackwater, we talk about the Marine Corps, the SEALs, all that kind of stuff. You reached a certain point where you're like, it's all just certifications. It's all just titles. It's all just this. This is not that. You're actually changing lives at a cellular level with this. So that's why I ask you, is this the first time that it's not a title? It's not anything. You're not in charge. You're not the boss. You're just doing what you were meant to do.
Yeah, I love not being the boss, and you're right, man. There is no greater calling and no greater purpose for somebody to be able to say they had some skin in the game of helping that person save that person's life. And so, yes, this is my first time to feel absolutely like I'm on the right path. Like I'm on a righteous path of helping others. And it's not about me. The reason why I said no is because the first time I felt that is with my social media. But this men's tribe came from the social media. And man, to hear so many others DM me or message me and say, man, that was life changing for me, man. I was going to kill myself, and your message was either funny or it made me laugh or it changed my perspective. And now I didn't kill myself. You know, that's huge. And that can only be not through me, because if I did it, it may something bad come from it, but from God using me as just a simple empty vessel for Him. And man, it's been extremely powerful for me to have this group, to lead it in a sense, and to allow God to do His work in it.
I want to ask you a question. I want to do a quote from you. You said that you weren't remembered for touchdowns or for saving teams. Instead, you were remembered for being a monster. In saying that, and looking at your life now, looking where it's headed, you think you're a good man now?
I know only one good man that walked this earth, and it's Jesus. And Jesus said, I'm not good. Only the Father is good. Who's good, right? And so I can't say that I'm a good person. I'm very careful at that. I can say that I'm a purpose-driven guy. I'm authentic. You know, maybe not what you see is what you get, but what you hear is the truth from me. And I try to keep it real. I try to level up with guys the best that I can. I'm a work in progress. I've learned that. I've humbled myself. I've been through the great humbling. Dr. Seuss would call it the great waiting room. I've been there, done that, and I don't want to be back in that waiting room. I want to keep driving forward and helping men find their purpose.
So, the last two things that I want to talk about, I want to kind of end this on you've changed as a person, you've changed as a man. Recently, within, we'll say, the last year, the Sean Strickland thing has popped up where something was said on social media, you came back and answered. I think you were kind of picked apart by some people in the media. But you, as a man, that person came on, they apologized to you. They did their end of it, and you held up your end. In everything that we've talked about, knowing you, reading about you, that's not the old you. That would have never happened. There wouldn't have been forgiveness. The armor wouldn't have come down. You wouldn't have been able. It's true. You wouldn't have been able to do that. I want to know how good that feels now that you get on the other side of it. You still say your point. You still said you'd bang out with this guy. You've still done the Jimmy Watson answer, but you've coated it with cupcakes around it a little bit and made it a little easier to swallow. So how good does that feel at the end of all of this that you know you're on the right path?
Wow, it feels, man, there's no other chain breaking medicine than to have forgiveness and to share love. And every single time I've had an anger outburst, or wanted to throw a jab at somebody, or wanted to attack Andy Stump for a moment there. Momentarily, the old Texas tornado was about to come out. But every single time I do that, I found myself completely condemned by my own actions. Like, Jimmy, how can you say that about this person when you've done 10 times worse? And I'm always reminded of that. And that's one good thing about having such a bad past, is you're reminded. And so you're not so quick to run your mouth. You're like, dang, man, that person has a long ways to go. They just don't know yet. And so I've had to operate in a lot of forgiveness, because I have been shown the most forgiveness, by God Himself. And so who am I to judge people? Who am I to lash out? So I appreciate that, brother.
Yeah, and watching the whole thing play out, watching the interview, it was just great to see how you responded to it, because it's so different from how you would have responded to it before. And I think we took a real step in men acting like men should act on both sides of it.
Yeah, wasn't it great? I had a lot of people actually tell me, brother, they were like, so you're really going to go on Andy Stump's podcast? Ain't it going to be awkward or whatever? And I was like, no, bro. Like, this is how you jump out of an airplane. You're very friend. This is what we do. This is how you want to become mortal enemies over this, or do you want to show others like, hey, Like this is how it should be done. I find it so, there's so many people that are sending divisive, hateful messages on social media. I can't even see a YouTube message. I don't care how good it is from whoever it is, where somebody doesn't send some hate, but like a message or something that's bad. And it blows my mind because being in the feds, in the federal penitentiary, the one thing that I learned is that no one ever disrespected anyone. The guards said yes sir, no sir to you. You were like very respectful over ramen noodles, coffee, whatever, because the consequences of disrespecting somebody was to get stabbed up. So now I look at things a lot differently too. Like, you know what? This person talks this trash, but it's really not them if you think about it. It's whatever's going on inside them, whatever happened to push them into this dark way of projecting themselves out onto me. So now it's kind of like a laughing matter, you know?
Can we talk about one thing that I've never heard you talk about really is your love of art and drawing? I mean, it's the reason that you got your dick caught in a belt sander, but can we talk about how it has helped you out through your life? And that's kind of how I want to end this is your love of art and something that once again, people look at you and go, there's no way this guy's into art, but you are.
Brother, when I was in James Haley Veterans Hospital, with this traumatic brain injury, and I'm like, but I'm able to walk around the hospital. I'm walking around, and I see these guys that are doing some like little paintings and stuff. And I remember saying, what are they doing down there? Why did they get to do that and we don't? And they said, oh, those are for the chronic pain management guys that are on narcotics and stuff. And I said, why don't we get to paint like that? I want to paint. So I started just drawing on a piece of paper with a pencil. So I started picking up art. And I realized that drawing, I always used to noodle and stuff in my class. And when I hold my 3 classes for my Mighty Warrior group now, man, when somebody's drawing or something, I don't look at it as a sign of disrespect. Teachers used to hate me for that. But I later learned that ADHD guys and girls, they need to doodle to really remember what you're saying. Often they'll doodle and stuff, and I never realized why I draw so much while I'm on the phone talking in a business meeting, whatever. I'm scratching on the paper, and so man, that art has been such an outlet for me. Oil painting, watercolors, just getting it all out there, man, and seeing, when you paint from the heart. Just try, grab a canvas, somebody out there, start painting. When you paint from the heart, what's really inside you will come out, man. And I painted some pretty dark dungeon scenes and stuff, and then it turned into, as God saved me, it's turned into this beautiful lighthouse, this beautiful oceans and stuff, but a lot brighter coming out of me now.
All right, I want to end this with a story that you've told a couple times. You have a favorite Bible story about the 4 men, and I think it kind of tells the story about your life. Do you know what I'm talking about?
The 4 lepers.
There you go.
Yeah, so there's 4 lepers. They're sitting outside the kingdom. Their own countrymen, their own people have kicked these 4 lepers out of their society because they're leprous, they're disease ridden. So they're left there to starve and die, these 4 lepers. And then, but one of them one day, and they're surrounded, this kingdom is surrounded by the enemy, by the way. They're all being starved out. But one of the lepers that is cast out with the other 4, just one of them, finally stands up one day and he says, guys, listen up. He goes, if we go back to where we came from, our own people are going to kill us. If we go back to the past, we're dead men. If we stay here, we die. We're rotting away. We're starving to death. But if we move into the future, if we go into the enemy's camp, if we dare to have boldness and courage and go into the enemy's camp, perhaps the enemy will have mercy on us and give us food and drink. The other 3 say, you know what? He's got a great point. And so they march off into the enemy's camp. And I often wonder what kind of balls that took, even though they were going to die anyways. They get to the enemy's camp, but before they get there, God has completely ran the enemy off their own camp They get all the spoils of the war before anybody else because they dared to win, like the British SAS said. They had the courage to do something that nobody else was willing to. Everybody else in their past was held up dying. They're dying, but they decide to take action. They move forward, and they go into the enemy's camp and win.
Compare it to your life.
Compared to my life, I have sit there, I have procrastinated, I have said, woe is me. I have talked about, I've looked at my past regrets. I've thought about going back to my past over and over and over, like, okay, I'll just go do this. That's going back to the past. God wants you to have a new future. But in order for you to have a new future and move into your new destiny, which comes from the Latin word destination, you got to have the boldness and courage to sit there right now and just say, man, if I stay here, I'm a dead man. If I stay in this position, I'm not going anywhere. I have to take radical acceptance of my situation and do something radical. I have to radically change my life and move into the future. Go in some direction. Go towards the enemy camp with boldness and courage. And I believe that God always honors the bold. And that's what I try to do.
All right, man. This has been an awesome conversation. Let's talk about where people can find you, where they can be part of this men's group, where they can find out more about you, your Instagram, all your social media. Let's talk about it and get more people talking to you.
Thank you so much. You can find me at Mighty Warrior 2023 on Instagram, or you can go to my website, www.jimmywatson.co. Not .com, but .co. So at Mighty Warrior 2023 or 2024 on TikTok and YouTube. And I just really appreciate your entire audience for listening to this, and would love for you to come over and check it out, especially the Mighty Warrior Tribe. See what we got going on there. We don't know what we don't know. Iron sharpens iron, only at the right angle. You know what I'm saying?
I do, man. I'm so glad that we got this taken care of, because we were sweating it a little bit last night, but I'm glad we got it taken care of. Listen, guys, you know where you can find Jimmy. Let's talk about where you can find me and wrap this whole thing up. You know you can find me on Instagram at the DTD_podcast. You can find me on Facebook at the DTD Podcast, and you can find me on YouTube, where all these conversations, they're in video form. But your one-stop shop, it's DTDpodcast.net. It's got pictures of Jimmy, his career, after his career. It lets you see a whole different side of him and learn a little more about his story, plus all the links to where you need to find him. But it also has audio, video, everywhere you can find me, and everything that this show is doing and trying to do out there. Now that you know where you can find me at dtdpodcast.net, make sure you go by there, be a friend, tell a friend, like, subscribe, all that other stuff. Let's talk about the people that make this show possible. Max Belts is a retired Navy SEAL that is killing the clothing industry right now, and belts. We all know that nothing stands up to wear and tear like a good leather belt. If you're looking for the toughest leather belt on earth, you've come to the right place. Max Belts. They're handcrafted in the USA by veterans who are serious about their craft. If you're looking for a belt that's tough enough for your active lifestyle and helps support those who've given so much to our country, look no further than Max Belts. It's the toughest belt on the planet. I wear one every single day. They're a perfect solution for casual or dress wear. They're ideal for utility or firearms carry, and a Mac belt is the highest caliber of American craftsmanship. They also positively impact military charity partners. He employs veterans. He's a veteran himself. You can find this and so much more at maxbelts.com. Make sure you stop by there. Guys, that's going to be it for this week. I want to thank Jimmy again for coming by. That's Jimmy. I'm DJ. This has been the show. Catch us on the next one. We'll see you guys later.